Well, you joined me exactly where I left you with this bike, a dead bike. Only 100 feet or so down the road and pop, there it goes. No idea what happened to it, but let's tear it down, see what happened, and see what I gotta replace. Well, I guess we can start with a visual, see what everything is like currently before we start tearing it down. So most obvious thing, of course, I disconnected the battery so that there's no more current going through the system, so there's no more potential for pops and bangs and flames or anything like that. Visually though, everything looks okay. All the connections are still nice and solid. There's no melted wires as far as I can see anywhere. Same up top here. Hall sensor wires look okay. Control wires look okay. Battery seems okay, at least on a visual. There's no obvious bulging or anything like that. These wires all seem okay. Motor looks okay, although one thing that I found out right away after it went pop and shut everything down basically is that it now really doesn't want to spin very well. Yeah, all the accessory wires and sensor wires here look okay as well. Also, another thing that I did, which I probably should not have done, I should have just disconnected the battery right away, but just before I did that, I turned off the key and turned it back on to see if that did anything, and I got a small flash of the voltage on the volt display, but then it died away really quickly and I got no lights on the controller itself. And also to do with the visual check, doing a smell check, I do smell something right around here, so that leads me to believe that something in here probably fried. Well, I guess it's on to the next step in this process of troubleshooting, which is tear down.
Let's get to tear down. From being a clown, tuning was a letdown. Now I have a frown, but maybe it's okay. What's a little smoke and fire anyway? I'm so sorry, Flipsky, you trusted me. Probably gonna rethink giving me that affiliate link. Now the montage is coming to an end, except that motor apparently, but we'll pretend so we can move on and see what's next.
All right, we have all of the components out here, and I learned a few extra things, but I'll show you that later on. But first, we gotta diagnose these further and see what's wrong. And the best way to diagnose, I think, is going to be taking each one of these individual components and connecting it to known good components here to see whether or not it works. And if it works, we know that it's good and we can move on. I think I wanna start first with the motor because that one has the least potential for going wrong and damaging other components. So what I'm gonna do is connect the Socin up to the far driver using my 48-volt battery. All right, so we have everything connected here testing the Socin motor, and I went into the app and made a few changes to the far driver to account for the 48-volt that it's now connected to rather than a 72-volt, and everything turns on and works just fine. In fact, if we hold on to the motor here and just give it a little bit of throttle, appears to be working pretty well. It's at a low RPM because I don't have the 3-speed connected, and when it's not connected, it defaults to the lowest speed, so that's why it doesn't sound as strong as it should. But actually, I think I can just go in here and change my low speed ratios and gear temporarily to 100% and give this a try here. Yes, it looks like the Socin is working perfectly fine. Thank God, because I actually put my own money into this. Now on to the next. And that second one being the controller, probably the most important thing to test in this case, and the thing that Flipsky actually asked me to test to see whether or not there was actually an issue with this. And to start testing it, I only have a couple of things connected. I have the battery leads, of course, so that way I can plug the 48-volt into it and actually give it power, and the key so that I can be able to turn it on and off. With just those two things connected, I'll be able to at least see that it has power. There are a couple of lights on the controller itself that will flash and indicate whether or not it's getting power. There's also some accessories like the Bluetooth module here that will start blinking if it receives power. And then if all of that works, I can continue by looking at some of the accessory wires and checking voltage there. I can see whether or not it's receiving the appropriate voltage. A lot of these different wires get different voltages based on what they're connected to. Some of them are as low as 3.3 volts, 5 volts, 12 volts, or full voltage power from the battery pack. So on to the next scary connection, actually plugging the battery into this thing. So let's see what happens. That answered that. I need to air this place out. Look at my finger. Well, I think it's safe to say that this controller is absolutely toasted, and now, thanks to that, my XT60 connection for the 48 volt is also very, very scorched. That at minimum needs to be replaced. I thought I'd do a little more investigating. Safely cut these off one at a time. Don't cut them both, obviously. You're gonna arc something and get this again. So that connection was so corroded that I couldn't get any readings on this with my voltmeter, but since I took that off safely and have probed the new live wires that are clean, I've seen that this has 50 odd volts in it and it was fully charged, so it looks like the battery pack should be good going forward, and it explains something that I found earlier with the 72 volt. So when I was taking out all of the components, I had noted that before I did that, I smelled something that was like plasticky burning smell, and I found out that where it was coming from was this connection on the battery. So this, of course, is that same connection that just fried on the 48 volt, but for the 72 volt, and it might be a little bit hard to see, but inside the positive terminal right down there, you can see that the inside of that is a little charred. Obviously not as bad as the 48 volt that we just saw happen, but maybe I was lucky in that I caught it early enough right when I pulled this off before it started getting worse and potentially catching fire like we just saw. Which made me worry about the battery being the issue here, or at the very least damaged because of the controller, but thankfully with this one you can connect to it via Bluetooth, and I was able to plug this into the charger and connected it with the Bluetooth, and I got all the stats and everything looked really good. It was still holding a positive charge, it was receiving a charge, and all of the batteries inside were all equally balanced. It looked like there was no issues to the inside of the battery whatsoever, which is great. And I think this is good enough where I can actually just clean it a little bit with some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, I think, just to get some of the corrosion out of there, so that way I can use the existing connection and plug it into a controller that won't make it explode. So after all that fun we had the other day, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is the culprit, and we're gonna open it up a little bit more to see exactly what happened in there. Well, we can see what the inside looks a little bit, at least. You can see where all of the connections are. There's some big posts, and it looks like further connections underneath the main board here with a couple of capacitors and other connections and things. I'm gonna talk like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to electricity, but I really don't. Here's the back side of that board. Nothing out of the ordinary. Well, now we have a look at the bottom board, and again, there's no obvious signs of pop or smoke. It even passes the smell test. Nothing really smells charred or gross or anything like that. No electrical fire that I can see. All I know is that when we connect these two to a battery source, it instantly goes pop. So there's clearly a short between these two somewhere. I just don't know where. So I took a bunch of pictures of the inside of the controller for Flipsky and sent that to them so they could be able to take a look at that and see if there was anything that I missed and whatever next steps are there. But in the meantime, we're gonna focus now on the battery. I had mentioned that the connection right here was a little bit charred, and I have cleaned that up, and it cleaned up pretty well actually. It was just all surface stuff, so the inside is now perfectly clean and it should be ready to go for another connection. And this time we're going to connect it to the far driver because we know that the far driver is good. So I'm hoping that when we plug this thing in, we don't see what we saw last time. But because we saw what we saw earlier, I'm taking a lot of extra precautions. I got the garage door open for proper ventilation and a little bit of PPE just in case. You never know. Drum roll, please. Please don't be eventful. What was I worried about? That's good. Uneventful. Let's turn it on. It's got power, and we'll just verify again that the motor is doing just fine. Whew. Now that is a relief. The battery is good, which I was a little bit worried about as well because this is the most expensive piece out of all of these. And of course the motor is working good, the second most expensive. Looks like it was just the Flipsky that had the problem. And I left it at that for quite a bit. That much is evident in the sheer number of times my facial hair has changed and the bike is back together. What's up with that? And during that time I had quite a bit of back and forth with the people at Flipsky. Also in the meantime, I was able to get some new XT60 connectors for my 48 volt battery and leads. This is the part I'm most nervous about. Despite being nervous about soldering a battery with voltage through it, I was able to successfully connect it without shorting or shocking myself, and now it's as good as new. But back to my communication with Flipsky, and unfortunately, it was inconclusive. I sent them multiple detailed pictures of everything that I found inside of the controller, and I guess the engineers looked at it and they couldn't find anything either. But they really didn't want to leave it there, and why would they? So the next time we see this bike, the redemption.